It's time for Portland Wrestling 2000s. Now, here he is, your number one host, Frank Culbertson.
Hey, wrestling fans, thanks for joining me. It's Frank Culbertson once again here on Portland Wrestling 2000s on the YouTube channel. Hey, be sure to like the show and so you don't miss a single moment of great Portland Wrestling 2000s action. And today we have a special episode for you. I am joined by two of the very best people I know in professional wrestling, and not outside, and just outside of professional wrestling. And that's Ed Moondog Moretti and Mike Rodgers. Thanks for joining me, guys. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here. Can't wait.
So, want to start, Mike? I want to introduce you to the fans that maybe don't know you totally. You wrote Ring Around the Northwest for 30 years, which was a monthly bulletin of results and interviews. And from that, you're the recipient of the James Melby Wrestling Historian of the Year Award in 2019, an award Al Getz, shout out to him, won this year. You had a turn as a referee. You've been in a battle royal and did almost won, I understand. And then you've taken to writing some wrestling books. So, and here are the books that you've put together and I've helped edit. Some really great books that everybody should buy, and they're available on Amazon. Tell me a little bit about these books and why you wrote them.
Sure. There's 3 books in the series of Excitement in the Air, and those are all interview books. The interviews were taken from the bulletin Ring Around the Northwest. Over 30 years, we had lots and lots of interviews, and we interviewed some of the top wrestlers in the Northwest or who had appeared in the Northwest. And there was enough interviews for 3 separate books, 3 volumes of the Excitement in the Air. And so I'm really tickled with those. I think they're interesting reading, and people have mentioned that they have enjoyed it. I also wrote a book called Katie Bar the Door, which is the history of Portland wrestling. My next book was Encyclopedia of Portland Wrestlers, and I think we have little bios of every wrestler that appeared. And I like to mention that we discovered one wrestler that didn't make it in there, and it was Woody Farmer. For some reason, we missed Woody Farmer. So I like to tell everybody it's almost every wrestler that appeared in the Portland Sports Arena. And the next book, we went to Hawaii and did a history of Hawaii wrestling. The wrestling in Hawaii is so fantastic, but I always like to tell people that the history of Hawaii, especially around Pearl Harbor, and you have Al Karasik, who was a wrestling promoter, and he must have been just such a hustler, especially around that time of Pearl Harbor, where he was just promoting anything, any type of entertainment that he could to make a dollar and provide entertainment for the troops. And so anyway, I think I like that book as well. And that's the history of Hawaii wrestling.
Awesome. And I'll encourage everybody to go and pick those books up on Amazon. And the interviews, I mean, they're superstars. There's Don Leo Jonathan, there's Dutch Savage, there's Luthez, and then there's Kyle O'Reilly, El Phantasmo, Dr. Luther. I mean, it is covering everybody who mostly was in Portland doing big matches, but also some of the current guys, stars that you see in AEW, like Bryan Danielson.
Yeah, I'm always tickled when I, watch AEW and it's like, oh, I've got an interview with that guy, and it's right at this time period, there's 3, 4, 5 guys on the show now, Kyle O'Reilly, El Phantasmo, Nick, Dr. Luther, it's so there's some currency to the books as well.
Absolutely. And then of course, go ahead.
To interrupt you. I got to tell you, those books that you did, Mike and Frank, besides those books, the only ones I would even care to keep forever, besides your books, is the ones from Scott Teal that did every month, and those things that did interviews with, because it's just stuff you'll never, once it's gone, you'll never get it back. But you guys did Portland wrestling totally adequate, and then totally the Hawaii stuff is just unbelievable. I'm still reading that, And to this day, there's so much information in there. It's just so awesome. It's just unbelievable.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, I feel it's pretty complete. People have asked me, if I'm going to do another book on Portland, and I don't think there's anything more. I don't think there's anything left.
Yeah, really true.
I'll find something. I'll find some Portland wrestling. And so that, as you heard, that was Ed Moondog Moretti. And I know we don't like to talk about maybe age a little bit, but Ed, you and I first met at Pacific Coast Championship Wrestling in Oregon City out of the failed Billy Jack promotion. Mel Saraceno started a promotion, and you were one of the people. That was in 1989, Ed. 1989. And then we worked together in the OPWF and a number of other little smaller promotions. And then, of course, Portland Wrestling, where you were an integral part of getting that off the ground in the WB and on Comcast. And forever grateful to you. And I know your great wife, Dale. I could talk about you guys. I can remember telling the story about you guys fixing the ropes and wrapping the ropes. And so you guys have been involved from not just in the ring, but out of the ring as well. And we should mention you are family to Shayna and Nick Wayne, who are blowing up in AEW. Talk a little bit about that and maybe some of those other promotions.
Well, Shayna, we raised Shayna since the time she was 10 years old. I knew her before that. I met her in 1978 when she was only 3 years old. And she's Dale's niece, actually. So we raised her as our daughter, and she came to live with us part-time in Canada and the rest of the time down in Oregon with us. And then Nick Wayne is Buddy Wayne's son with Shayna. They were married. They had Nick, and kind of the rest is kind of history. Nick's been in the ring since he was 3 years old, or even before that he was in the ring, but he actually started being seriously trained about at a 3-year-old level. So he's really come a long way. I mean, when I watch him, I'm just like totally amazed. Like, who am I seeing here? Because he's so fluid and he looks so polished for a kid his age.
In fact, let's watch Ed Moretti and a young Nick Wayne at the Buddy Wayne Wrestling Academy.
It's just incredible. And I was watching him, and I know he originally was asking me one time. We took a walk here where I live in Hidden Valley Lake, California, and we were walking along the beach. We have a lake here. We were walking along the beach, and he came up to me and said, he calls me Grampy. And he said, Grampy, how do I do interviews? How will I do interviews when I get into wrestling? I go, well, Nick, here's what you do. You pick out something you want to talk about. Like, say this is your opponent. I say, let's say that tree right there is your opponent. He goes, the tree? I go, yeah. Say that tree is your opponent. You tell that tree how good you are and what you're going to do to him. And that's what he did. And now he can do an interview. I mean, I only take partial credit of it, but I mean, now he can do an interview at any given time. You could just say, hey, interview right now, 30 seconds, go. And he can do it. And I'm really proud of him. His work's fantastic. His interview skills are good and getting better, I think. And Shayna is just like in her glory because she's in a position where she can really be that kind of, I'm the mom, but I'm also somebody else. You know, she's Mother Wayne, and she's doing good in that role, I think. So yeah.
And I look at.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I look at Nick's facials, and you just want to slap that kid.
You do, yeah. I got it, and I'm sitting back watching this, laughing because he's such in his gimmick now. You know what I mean? He's just like he's the guy you want to beat up, but you probably couldn't because he's a tough guy. So, yeah, I'm really proud. I can't express how proud Dale and I are, with everything they're doing. It's just great. And really, I don't really know which direction they're heading because that's part of the thing that I guess they're not allowed to really talk about. And I don't ask. I just take it day to day and hope they're on the show all the time. And it's fantastic. It's just I'm so happy for them, really, and Perk.
And so I would say you being very old school. I mean, you were the working the headlock, working the crowd, doing all the moves of the generation of the 70s and 80s and early 90s. And he got trained in that, but he has really transitioned into the current style of wrestling and really picked up and excelled at that. And I worked with as part of the old world order in Portland Wrestling 2000s, and we have a whole show of Buddy Wayne and the Old World Order and Ed Moondog Moretti in action on the Portland Wrestling 2000s channel. Just check it out and be sure to, again, like the channel so you don't miss a single of that great wrestling action. There's a lot of Ed Moondog Moretti in there, and some of it with the grappler, and then some of it is tagging with the grappler against Terry Taylor and Scotty Mack at the Oregon State Fair. It's a great match. Be sure to check it out, Portland Wrestling 2000s. But the reason I brought these two guys together was to talk about something near and dear to my heart, and that is the commission in the state of Oregon. And we'll get into why it means so much to me and what the transition was to get Portland wrestling going in the state of Oregon after a long absence after Don Owen stopped in 1991. So I'm going to go to Mike, the historian, first and say, Mike, talk about the commission before 1987 and how it was run on local levels, and maybe tell a little bit of Kurt Poppenheim, how that fits.
Sure. There wasn't really a statewide commission. I think every town might have had their own just local commission, and they got a fee for approving and doing all the paperwork and everything, and I'm sure it was pretty much a good old boy system, through the 50s and 60s. There's one notable thing that came up, and that was Kurt von Poppenheim wanted to promote wrestling in Oregon. And throughout the years there had been a rule or a law that said a town could only have one promotion promoting in that town. And he wanted to challenge that. And he ended up suing the commission or whoever was deemed in charge of the Commission of Oregon, and he tried to sue for $1 million. And reading through the transcripts of what went to court and everything, it really sounded like his lawyer was not very good, and that case went nowhere. But the interesting thing that Dean Silverstone passed along, because he and Kurt von Poppenheim were friends, and von Poppenheim really had things lined up. He really wanted to promote, and according to Dean, he told him that he had quite a crew ready to come into Portland that were well-known wrestlers. So with just a little bit of change in history, Oregon wrestling, Northwest wrestling could have looked a lot different than it ended up. And so that's an interesting note on the history of the commission. The commission just denied Poppenheim's effort to promote. And yeah, that's probably the most notable thing of the commission prior to 1987.
And then in 1987, the state created a single state boxing and wrestling commission, and it was under the jurisdiction of the state police, and that gave it some real enforcement teeth. And over time, anybody who's followed anything in the Northwest or wrestling in general knows that the commission has had a pretty bad reputation. But in actuality, the commission did some really, really good things. And Ed Moretti, talk about those parts of the commission that you served on and why you joined, and the good parts of the commission and helping things go that some of the boys really needed taken care of.
Right. Well, I think the commission with Bruce Anderson saw the problems that could arise with the new rules coming out from different, not necessarily wrestling rules, but new rules about when you have a show somewhere, you have to have a lot of different kind of medical things. You have to have different kind of just everything. Everybody has to be clean. They have to be tested and make sure they're not going to develop or get anybody, contagious, that kind of things. Things like that the commission all looked after. A lot of guys didn't like what the commission did because they were so inbred in their mind that commission or people's trying to control wrestling is bad. But Bruce Anderson, he understood both sides of it, I think. Maybe not so much at first, but he came to understand both sides of it. And he really, I've talked to him, very many times in the past, in deep and in depth. And he really did like wrestling. He liked the whole spectacle of wrestling. He liked the guys too, but they didn't like him. And I think he really, really wanted to help, and he did help a lot of people with getting their money if they didn't feel they were getting their money properly, and wanted to clean mats, clean rings, wanted the building to be clean, wanted people to be safe when they went to the building and saw these matches. And I don't know, I just think he was really instrumental in fixing a lot of things up. And I don't know about today how it is, but he really did fix those things up and made it a little safer, even though a lot of people didn't like it. Sandy Barr didn't like it. Matt Bourne didn't like it. There was a lot of guys that didn't like it. But, unfortunately, I think he did a lot of good things and really didn't get much thanks for it. We gave him a lot of thanks for it, the three of us, I know, because we all understood what he was trying to do, I think. I think he was trying to make wrestling better. A few of the things we had to kind of dance around, like blood and all that stuff, but it worked out okay, for what it needed to be, I think.
The makeup of the board, I believe you said the guys that were on the board they knew about boxing and they knew about wrestling, but they didn't know the workings of wrestling. They weren't smart to the business, and that was something you helped Bruce understand.
That's what I tried to do, is help him understand that, Bruce, we're not going out there. We're not going to go out there and cause a whole, where you're going to have to call all kinds of ambulances in because something happened. We're in control of what we do. We're professionals. We're in control. And when I got on the commission, it was nice because nobody else on the commission but Bruce really understood. The rest of the commission was, like you said, were all boxing people, and they didn't have a clue what they were trying to regulate. They were kind of like regulating without representation type thing. And so they had no idea, and it kind of laid on Bruce and I to understand what's going on and tell these guys, look, relax. You know boxing, but you don't know wrestling. And I think we maybe made it a little better that way for a while.
And Mike, I'll throw it to you to talk about some of the reputation. Ed mentioned a few guys, but I know in Katie Bar the Door, on a whole section on the commission, you talk about, give some information on how, like Jesse Barr, Dutch Savage, what was the impression of most of the wrestlers that you knew or interviewed regarding Bruce Anderson and the commission?
Well, the one thing that I've always written was wrestling as an entity didn't like the commission because wrestling never had anybody tell them how it was going to be. And there was so much pushback on the commission and on Bruce because Bruce was is a charismatic guy, and they were going to butt heads, and Bruce wasn't going to back down. And then there was so many rumors about where Bruce came from, that he was a shill for WWE, but the thing of it was, WWE never ran almost the whole time that Bruce was there, towards the end finally. But so that was one of the rumors. A rumor I heard that he was straight from the mob, he was part of that and trying to infiltrate wrestling, and but then you had the people that he helped, and they would speak out. I know one wrestler I interviewed said, "Well, I don't like the commission very well, but Bruce helped me. He helped me with get my money." So it was that mixed bag, and just to put it generally, wrestling as a whole just didn't like to be told how things were going to be.
And one of the things I know Ed has corrected a number of people over the years. I can hear his voice in my ear right now as he says uh, he was not a commissioner, he was the executive director.
Right.
People always say the commissioner did this. No, there was an executive director. And it's just a little detail I like to keep in the forefront that Ed has ingrained into me, that he was an executive director.
And I got to be vice president for a little bit at the time. That was kind of funny, but there was no one else that really wanted to sit there and do it and go over things with Bruce. So that's how I got that little label for a while.
And we talked about rules, and actually the rules, and we'll talk about them in more detail in just a little bit, but the rules were actually set up like would be in a real wrestling contest and not in the professional wrestling realm. So in 1988, there were a bunch of rule changes proposed. Fan barriers, mats on the ring, security in all the corners, an over-the-top DQ rule was proposed, and that talked about banning the blade and implementing some pretty strict drug testing. So, Ed, without talking about drug testing first, did those rules get implemented at all by Don Owen, and did it make the product better or safer for the boys?
I think it made the product better and safer for the boys in the fact that we needed to do those things to keep wrestling going in Portland. As far as the commissions were concerned, and this is commissions like worldwide, statewide, whatever, they wanted wrestling to be more like under the gun and maybe even not at all. A lot of people were voting it out, like we're not even going to have this anymore. So when we put the mats in and we put the barriers in, I think those were good things because it left us be able to run our show and still have a show. A lot of the things were a bit like, banning the blade. Well, okay, maybe, but if you're all tested, like we always said, that was one of my arguments. If everybody's tested, it shouldn't matter if somebody gets, a bloody nose, whatever. It's easy to do. It's not always the blade. It's just sometimes it happens, and then it would ruin the whole show sometimes if you stopped it because of that. But the way they do it now, I like, you put on the gloves, the referee puts on the gloves, and things continue. And that I thought was a good thing. Now, as far as like, what were the other things you said? You said
mats on the floor.
Yeah,
fan barriers.
Top rope thing. That was kind of like, I kind of liked that rule. It never was implemented by Don Owens, though. But I like the top rope rule. We had it for a while in California, and if you did it behind the referee's back, that got you good heat. Because they'd say, oh, he's going to get disqualified, and oh, the ref didn't see it. That's kind of a good thing to have. It's kind of like pulling the guy's hair. And now you went to the top rope thing, So that was good. But I think, like, a lot of those rules really did keep wrestling being able to go.
Mike, I'll come back to you because I'll put up a picture here of a National Wrestling magazine, and I know you covered it in Ring Around the Northwest. But Mike Miller went to the commission because of repeated scabies that he was getting, and in the article it talks about Rip Oliver as well. What do you remember about that incident? And then once he finishes, Ed, was there any? I'll let you talk after it, Mike. Was there any heat on Mike Miller for bringing that issue up to the commission?
Well, it came about, there for a while, there were a lot of commission meetings in rapid succession monthly, and I was attending a number of them, and one time Mike Miller had come in, and he was greeted by the other wrestlers, and he just said, "I'm just saving money by not wrestling," and that's what I remember him saying, and talking a little bit about the scabies. Scabies is like a little mite that can burrow into your skin, and it was really a problem there for a while in Portland wrestling, because I guess the mats were not getting cleaned often enough, and so it came out that Miller had it, Rip Oliver had it, maybe some other wrestlers had it, but those were the two that really came out and were it affected. And that's one of the things that I think the commission was trying to clean up, is like some regulations for the number of amount of times that the mats needed to be cleaned, and that was just another way that the commission was trying to help the boys.
Ed, any fallout from Mike Miller?
I don't remember fallout from Mike Miller. I remember I was screaming about the mats and the turnbuckles and all that stuff, because I would see Don's mats and Sandy Barr's mats, and I go, now go look at Championship Wrestling's mats. Go look at the WWF's at the time mats. They're always clean. They always look very much professional. Our mats in Portland Wrestling, when you guys were running there, Portland Wrestling mats were always clean. They were always nice. Nobody ever got anything from those mats. Maybe a little rug burn now and then, but other than that, I mean, they were always good rings, clean mats, that kind of stuff. So, I don't know. I don't remember I remember Mike saying he had scabies, and a few other people had other things too, but if you take a shower afterwards and the mats are clean, you won't get anything like that. I don't believe. I never did in my whole time I was wrestling, 30-something years. I never got scabies or anything like that. I got a few rug burns and stuff like that. Other than that, nothing, thank God. And then later on in my career, I never got, because I was here in Portland Wrestling, never got anything like that. It was always very clean. And I take my hat off to you for that, for sure.
Well, I appreciate the compliment. I will throw that compliment right to Sean, who was in charge of setting up the ring and taking it down and cleaning it. And I know watching her and getting it cleaned in a pool, getting it disinfected, and then getting it dried was a lot of work. And she did a really good job. I've always appreciated that. That was nothing that I did, but she really took it upon herself. Because she cared about wrestling and cared about the boys' health, so she did a great job. Go ahead.
If I can just do one last thing, those people that did clean our mats for Portland Wrestling, I always walked outside and to the ring before the matches started and said, "Thank you very much for doing that. I really appreciate it." And as far as the rules go, though, if the rule wasn't followed, maybe. It was still a rule that was there in place for us to say that we did know about it, we did do it if we could, but they weren't always followed. But they were pretty much in place, and they were there, and that kept us able to run those shows that we did.
Let's talk about the drug testing, because it's always been said that WWF didn't come here for a number of years, WCW didn't come here for a number of years, because of the drug testing, and that we had random drug testing rules. And so you could say that Cassidy or whoever could come into the dressing room and test whoever he wanted to in the WWF, or he could test everybody. And that was the reason that they didn't come here anymore. From your work on the commission or understanding, Ed, was that the only reason they didn't come here, or was there something else?
Well, I think it was that, and the rules were not in place to stop wrestling. It was there to fan the flames, kind of like that. were coming up from people going, we need to regulate the people that were in like high positions in the state. We need to stop this stuff, and we need to ban this stuff. And I think just the rules that we did, we kind of adhered to all of them, but they were just to fan the flames for people, like telling them to shut up about all that stuff. We're watching ourselves. Our promoters are watching what we're doing. They know the deal, so they're trying to take care of that stuff. And I can't remember. I had to pee in a cup a few times, and it's no big deal. If you're clean, you're clean. And if you weren't clean, then they give you a certain time to get clean. And I don't remember that many people. It was quite a long time ago. I don't remember that many people failing, but I know a few did. But I don't remember exactly the whole story about that. So,
well, and back then it was fairly common in the business there was a fair amount because people were traveling so many days, and so the drug use increased for a while. And so I'm sure that there was some concern from the publicity standpoint if someone got busted or cheated on a test and got caught. So Don Owen stops promoting in 1991. Sad day for all of us that love Portland wrestling. A few indie promotions tried to run, the Kaforis, Pete Schweitzer. Let's see, there was Johnny Fairplay and Jim Valley ran a promotion for a little while. But Bruce Anderson retires. Jim Cassidy is appointed. There's virtually no wrestling of any sort really going on. So there's no revenues coming in because the commission existed off 6% of ticket sales. There were efforts to disband the commission that had failed. MMA was just kind of starting up in a little bit towards the end of 1990s. Randy Couture and Matt Lindell were running some shows at the Roseland and borrowing my TV lights, Randy Couture. And so there really wasn't any wrestling going on. So I want to tell the story of how WB, Portland Wrestling, my Portland Wrestling, as I call it, started. And we'll get to the rules and how this commission all affected my life. So I was the business manager, controller of the WB affiliate 32 in Portland, Oregon. The station itself used to be a Christian broadcasting network years ago. WB had bought it when that went out of business. And so there was a big studio that they had shot TV shows out of, but being what we were as an affiliate, we weren't doing any production. And knowing that revenue is important, I said, we need to the general manager, Steve Dent, we need to do some revenue. We need to produce something here to get some more money in the station. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And he wasn't from the area. So I had to convince him about Portland wrestling and give him the history. And he said, well, do a business proposal and let me see it. So I wrote one up. We sent it to the company at that time was owned by Acme Television, just like the Coyote in Los Angeles. KTLA was part of their studio group, and it got approved. And so the next step was to go to the commission meeting and see what they said. And that meeting was attended by Ed Moondog Moretti, Mike Rodgers, and myself. And all the meetings were recorded on these little, at that time, state-of-the-art 2-inch little tape recorders, which will come into play in just a little bit. And do you guys remember that meeting and how it went?
Absolutely, I remember. We were all looking for that answer to see if you needed a license to promote a TV show. It's because essentially you weren't going to take it to spot shows. You weren't going to take this anywhere else. It was just going to be confined to the studio. And if that was going to fall under the point of where you needed a license, and that was the question that you were looking for. And they came out, I remember it very clear. They said, I don't believe that you will need a license if this is the case, if it's just a TV show. And we all three just about jumped up and started high-fiving each other. It was that moment that we knew that was the answer that we were all looking for.
And I can remember Ed specifically. I can hear, it's like it was yesterday. Ed looks at me and he says, "You just got yourself a TV show."
I kind of remember that. Yes, we were all smiles. I'm sure of that, but I remember feeling that way. Yeah, we just got ourselves a TV show, and now it all begins. Now we got to figure out what we're going to do. And we had enough meetings before that to go, I think we know what we're going to do. But we had to rub it all out and make it work.
Yeah, I ordered 2 tag teams and a championship belt, and we bought the ring from Pete Schweitzer. It was a good ring. We got the studio all set up with lights. We had a tech, we had sound guys, we had technical guys. Everything was in place. We got some great talent. Matt Farmer, Nikki Six, Tony Kazina, some young guys. We had this guy named the Grappler and Ed Moondog Moretti as the veterans. Roddy Piper threw some stuff in there. He was doing some stuff with TNA, and that's really what we did, was we filmed some stuff for him instead of paying him. And we brought in this guy. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but his name was Brian Danielson. And that was actually his very first network television match, was in Portland Wrestling. It's on YouTube, and we'll be talking about it on the Portland Wrestling 2000 YouTube channel. Did I tell you to like the channel and so you don't miss a moment of great wrestling action yet? And buy the books that Mike Rodgers put out. Yeah, plugs for wrestling. And so you can find that match. It's Adam Firestorm and Danielson against the Black Dragon and Dr. Luther in a great tag team match. So we started going, and it was very, very successful. The ratings were terrific. And most important to the station, new sponsors came in. And so Tom Peterson came back. He wasn't on the channel. The Tire Factory gave us a good sponsorship deal. 1-800-OWN-A-CAR came in. And then Rent to Own Auto and the famous Miss Rent to Own Auto. Shout out to Brian Alvarez of the Wrestling Observer. And that issue is addressed on Portland Wrestling 2000 YouTube channel. Check it out. And so it was a lot of fun. And it got going. And everything was pleased until it wasn't. And I'll put up the letters here and I will actually put them up for a little bit for you to read. But it was February 5th of 2003, we got a letter from Jim Cassidy saying that we were not licensed to promote. It was a cease and desist letter, that we were in violation of state laws. And that there would be consequences if we continued. And then the very next day, we got a very friendly letter from the Assistant Attorney General for the state, and here it is right here, put up for you to read, saying that he understood we were in violation of state law and that we cease and desist or there would be consequences. The station was not going to get a promoter's license. At the time, what the licensing requirements were for promoters was for anybody that had certain levels of management in decision making at a station, had to produce some financials. They had to produce their driver's license, their social security numbers, answer a bunch of questions. The station ownership then would have to produce some financials for the state to look at. And truthfully, for a single station in Portland, Oregon, Acme just simply was like, yeah, we're not going to do that. And so I got on the phone. I had daily conversations with Jim Cassidy, and the Assistant Attorney General. And truthfully, they were really telling us, if you guys run a show, we're going to come and we're going to shut you down, and we are going to arrest you and Steve. And I don't know about you, but that didn't go over well with me or Steve. And so we actually had to stop for a little while. But before we stopped, the station's lawyer asked the Cassidy and the commission for a copy of the tape of the meeting where they said we didn't actually need a license. And remember, I mentioned that all the meetings were recorded on a little 2-inch recorder. Well, surprisingly enough, When they went to give us a copy, that part of the meeting just didn't get recorded for some reason. Hard to believe, but if you remember this guy in this incident, then it's really no surprise in why people sometimes don't necessarily trust the government. But thankfully, there's this thing called wrestling fans. I don't know if you know that, but wrestling fans can be pretty excitable. So the stoppage of Portland wrestling got local news coverage in the Oregonian, in Willamette Week, and a number of other publications. And one of the things that happened was wrestling fans started calling the Boxing and Wrestling Commission, and they called and they called and they called. And Jim Cassidy on the phone was not pleased with us providing their phone number for people to call, because wrestling fans called and they called and they called nonstop. And then one of our fans named Steve Poland happened to be an aide for the House Speaker Tootie Smith for the state of Oregon. And he thought this was terrible. What's going on? And so he actually got a House bill passed. We worked with him to make him understand some of the wrestling business, but they were able to change the rules. House Bill 3581, I believe. It was Stan Poulin, sorry. And so they put in the term entertainment wrestling separate from the regular Olympic other type of wrestling. They also adopted a whole bunch of new rules that promoters could live with. And so that was pretty exciting. And we actually, in one of our tapings, had a one-time guy come in and use the name Stan Poulin to give him a rub on television. And the Stan Poulin guy won a match in Portland wrestling. I should go back to the rules for just a minute. In some of the conversations that I had with Jim, I asked him, well, so if we were, and these rules are archaic, we're going to talk about them. If we got a promoter's license, would you look the other way on all these rules? And he said, oh, absolutely we would. And I said, would you put that in writing for us? And he said, no, we absolutely can't do that. And why that's important is because, and Ed, you know this story very well, and Mike too, the grappler had actually been fined in Eugene for violating one of the rules, and that was because he had tape too far up his thumb. It was a $250 fine, too far up his thumb and onto his wrist. And one of the rules, as I'll read in just a minute, is that a wrestler can't have the tape like that. And so then when they asked why he had the tape, he said he had injured his thumb the week before. And then he said, I could fine you more for not reporting that to the commission. And so knowing that there are times when selective enforcement can happen, as a corporation, we weren't willing to settle for that. But it was a hectic time. We got it changed. The station sold to Tribune, owner of WGN in Chicago. And they said, we don't want to do wrestling. We need that time slot for one of our shows, Soul Train, which was not a big hit in Portland, Oregon. And I know, I'm not going to say anything. But then Comcast Sportsnet was just starting up. And they came to me and said, we would like to do Portland wrestling. And Tom Peterson said, I would go with you. The Tire Factory said, I'll become the title sponsor. And a number of other people did. So I had to leave the station, go out and do Portland wrestling on my own, because I couldn't sell advertising and be the business manager, controller at the WB. It'd be a conflict of interest. So off I went. We did it for a few years, and then we didn't. But I wanted to read some of these rules, and I'll type them in later on.
Frank, before you read the rules, can I ask you something?
Absolutely.
When the what was it? You said Cassidy, maybe it was. I don't think I was on the commission then. Correct?
You were not on the commission at the time.
Yeah, because if they'd have brought that thing up to me about Grappler having tape on his thumb or whatever, I'd have said, you guys are crazy to say something like that. That's not really your concern, is it? You know, that's what I'd said to the other commissioners. That's not really your concern whether he's broke his finger or broke his thumb or not. That happens to all of us. We just don't report any half of the stuff that happens to us because it's a contact sport. And so what? We got tape on our fingers. I know what they're trying to imply with that, but that doesn't mean that's the truth. And that's why I'm not on. That's why I got off the commission when I did, because I could see a lot of that stuff coming. And there's no way I could have helped do what I was doing to help. So that's why I got off the commission and I went back and was able to wrestle again.
And I want to say one thing because I got to look up his name here, the side here. I was also talking to the WWF's Richard Herring, who is Vice President of Governmental Relations and Risk Management. And I had brought to him what was happening. I asked, would you guys be involved? Would you help get the rules changed? But specifically because of any relationship to drug testing, he said, no, we don't want to be involved in this at all. And then surprisingly enough, when the rule got changed, you know who was in front of all the cameras? That's right. It was the WWF. And they promised to come back to Portland, and they said, we're going to do a pay-per-view. And they did. And the revenues came in. And they, of course, took a lot of credit. Mike Rodgers, do you remember what happened? Some special event happened to you and me when the WWF came back to town.
Yeah, we had a chance to go backstage, and they had a meet and greet session, and Ric Flair and Triple H were there, and I stopped and was able to get some pictures, and that was a lot of fun.
That's right. So I think we'll put the picture up here of you and me, and I think we were challenging them to a title match, but they backed down or something like. I think that's
something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so some of the rules, and I'm going to put them up here on the screen so you don't see me just reading them. But back then, wrestlers may use an assumed ring name, but the right to use any certain ring name had to be approved by the director. So if you were Killer Carl Cox or Mike, you know, one wrestler who Don Owens wouldn't let him use the name Killer, wasn't it?
Right. Killer Brooks and Killer Carl Krupp. So it was Baron Von Krupp and Bad News Brooks.
That's right. So in the past, if these rules were strictly followed, the director had that ability. Office employees, ticket takers, security guards, and timekeepers were all required to have a license and pay a $10 fee. Substitutions on a card were not permitted in the wrestling main event, except in cases of emergency where the director finds such an action is justified, and only when the substitute has been approved by the director. The referee shall immediately stop any match in which blood from a contestant or from the referee appears regardless of the cause of the injury. Tape shall not be permitted on the hands, arms, or any other part of the wrestler's body without the consent of the commission physician. Clearly, Mike Rodgers was a rule breaker, even as a referee. And this is the one that would have Ed Moretti, and I encourage you, watch his matches on Portland Wrestling 2000. He's a great heel. And I think you've been a heel 99% of your career, Ed. Would that be right?
Except for in Canada.
Canada, what can we say? And so imagine trying to get heat if any of these rules are not allowed. All holds known to be wrestling science are permissible. Toe holds, splits, hammerlocks, scissors holds, headlocks, wrist locks, touches which through pain produce a legitimate and scientific. The so-called flying drop kick is allowed, but must be executed by the use of both feet simultaneously. Now, those are moves that very few people in wrestling use today.
That kind of rules are crazy because those people that made those rules did not understand professional wrestling.
Absolutely.
They might have understood high school wrestling and college wrestling, but not professional wrestling. And that's the reason I pushed so hard to go on that commission, and I was accepted because Bruce was the one that let me on that commission because he understood he needed that side of it. He needed the side that is actually a wrestler nowadays in the, what was it, the 80s, 90s, yeah, 80s, and 90s. He needed someone from that place that would be honest with him about these rules. Yes, those are all legitimate toe holds and all that stuff are all legitimate moves, but they're not TV moves. They're not exciting unless you can make them that way, and that's what we try to do. But some of those things, it sounds like, and that's what made us so upset, is because it sounded like it's the government putting their finger down on the sport of pro wrestling, and that's why it was so looked at and viewed so negatively, and that's why Bruce got so much heat, because even though he didn't agree with a lot of those rules, he still got blamed for a lot of those rules.
Well, there were some holds that were specifically called fouls. And again, Ed Moretti, a scientific wrestler in ways of an Eric Froelich, Lynn Shelley, all of Mike Rodgers' very favorite wrestlers. And so Ed never used any of these holds. I just want you to know that. I'm telling you, he never used these. Hitting with the fist clenched, gouging the eyes with fingers, inserting fingers in mouth of opponent and pulling the mouth open, fighting, deliberately kicking either with the knee or foot in the groin or other part of the body, or butting with the head. Pulling hair or whiskers. Ed would never pull hair or whiskers. Never.
Not in front of the referee.
Elbowing, throwing the opponent from the ring, scratching, twisting, or pulling ears. The use of the flying broad jump, landing on an opponent, or rubbing opponent's eyes on the ropes, or deliberately butting. Moves he never, ever used. I appreciate that honesty and that scientific part of your career, Ed.
The one that Mike Rodgers, when he was the referee, he scolded me for was the hook on the side of the what is that called, Mike? What did you call it?
Fish hook.
Yeah, fish hook. That's right. He even told me to do it one time. So that's not good.
I'll never forget that story.
Me neither.
Ed's wrestling Tim Flowers, and the rope comes off and falls on the mat, and Ed looks at me. I'm in the front row, and I go, like that. Ed shakes his head yes, and the next thing I know, like I'm calling spots from the front row.
That was great, though. I loved it. That was the perfect thing, Mike. It was great. Perfect thing. But no, really, when I broke the rules, I tried to do it behind the referee's back. That's just the way it was. That's the way I was basically taught. I mean, from watching them so much, because I wasn't taught by anybody but myself and my friends. But that's what we tried to do, is do it right and do it like to get a little bit of heat or whatever.
And that's the point of wrestling, of being the bad guy, is getting the heat, to have the referee distracted or do it behind the ref's back, because these are the rules that get heat. And that's something that the kind of heat that gets today, if you call it heat, is completely different. And that's, I guess, old school for me. And one of the guys that just passed, unfortunately, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time is Beauregard. And Beauregard was flashy, and his tights were different, and he was just different than anybody else really that had come through Portland as far as the outfits that he was kind of wearing. You had Gorgeous George before that, in some of the outlandish outfits that you might see. But actually, there was a rule regarding the costumes for wrestlers. Ed usually wore the tight tights and the singlet, so he appeared to follow all the rules as he was as a scientific wrestler. So wrestlers must be properly clothed in neat and clean athletic apparel. Trunks and tights must be well fitted and whole with high waistbands. If short trunks are used and limbs are left bare, the length of the leg of the trunk should be not less than 3 inches below the crotch, and 2 pairs of trunks, one over the other, must be worn, which is something that Buzz Anderson forgot. For those that don't know, Buzz forgot his outfit. Yeah, Buzz is a great guy, and it was a trained by Buddy Rose and Ed Wiskowski, solid wrestler, uh, hairy as can be, and he had a great gimmick. He's got some matches on Portland Wrestling 2000's YouTube channel. Be sure to like and subscribe. But you'll see him. He was fun to work with. But he forgot his outfit. Ed loaned him some stuff, but he didn't have under trunks, and I believe was whipped into the corner, and it was balls to the wall, as they say, for all to see, but was edited off of television.
So we can see how important those rules are.
Absolutely. Buzz, thank you very much. In addition, female wrestlers shall include a breast protector and body shirt with their ring attire, which is not typically what you see in wrestling today for sure. And the skin of each wrestler must be clean and free from grease, lotions, or other foreign objects. And that's why.
Yeah, I could just, yeah, no grease. Oh yeah, that happened.
But part of that, having those rules, is to give the referee authority. So at the start of the match, when the referee used to look and check the legs and check the boot and all, check the trucks, that was all part of the story. And nowadays
Yes.
we don't have that. And the referee being licensed by the state back in the day, mostly for boxing and purposes, was really an authority figure that had to report to the state. So if there were certain things that the referee was reporting to the state, and that was one of the rules for wrestlers, was why the referee had these authorities, because he was in charge. Referees are rarely in charge nowadays. Final thoughts. The commission. There's wrestling going on in the Oregon region. DOA runs a regular show, is doing fairly well now at the Expo Center. Prestige Wrestling runs at the Roseland and just ran at PSU. I think they did 1,200 people. They do a good crowd at the Roseland. AEW has come. WWE comes. Defy has been here a couple of times. Matt Farmer and his gang is doing a tremendous job in promoting that, especially up in Washington, doing a great job. So, but the commission is fairly hands off. I would ask you guys, your opinion, is wrestling better with a commission that's hands off, or is it better to have a commission that's fairly hands on? Speaking mostly of safety issues and things like that for the boys or girls. Oh,
I guess I would say if the rules are in place and there if you need them, I would probably prefer as a fan to have the commission hands off. But if the rules are in place to protect the wrestlers, I think that's what's important. We saw those rules, minimum pay for a match, and things like that help and protect the wrestlers. I think that's what's important. So if they're hands off now, but they're and willing to step in when an issue arises, that's probably what's needed.
Okay, I kind of agree with you, Mike, but on the part that maybe be best if the promoter was the one that told, was the police officer as far as are you doing something too dangerous? Are you going to step in if something happens? And the promoter, of course, would be responsible to the commission. But again, I don't know that the commission would actually be, in this day and age, especially what I see now, would even be somebody to be listened to, because they're not. I mean, it's just not a commission that they're crazy for this. I mean, boxing hasn't changed too much, but wrestling sure has. So I don't know. I think it's kind of up in the air, depending on who would be the person responsible.
I don't know the rule in Oregon about ambulances. I know in Washington you have to have some sort of personnel And so there's a cost that promoters haven't always wanted to put forth, but that is a safety issue for the competitors in the ring. And you look at some of what's happening as far as just not only just the moves, the dives, the athletic ability that these guys are doing, but then you got a lot of death match wrestling going on. And I think that that's an area that I don't think the commission saw coming back then. I mean, you had Loser Leave Town and Texas Death Match, and I know we did at the Total Chaos pay-per-view, we did a barbed wire death match with Dr. Luther and Lester the Legend, with real barbed wire, not Hollywood barbed wire that doesn't stick to your body as some groups are using. This was real barbed wire, and it was kind of dangerous. But the deathmatch issues have gone quite a bit farther into what it is. So how the commission handles that, I don't know, but I think it'll become an issue down the road. Any final thoughts on anything?
Final thoughts on wrestling for me is I really, really, really miss it. My last match was in 2010 in Santa Rosa for APW. That was the last time I put my stuff on and stepped in the ring. I knew it was time to not be there after that match. I mean, the match was fine. The guy that I wrestled took care of me great. He was a young guy. I think he was Mr. Wrestling 90 or something like that, 900, whatever it was, in APW. But he took care of me. We had a decent match. I put him over, and that was my last match. But I do miss it. Sometimes I think I can get right back in there till I see Nick, and then I go, nope, I can't do that. There's no way I can do what they do now. There is just no way. Or what I kind of want to. I don't want to fall from a ladder. I don't want to fall from the ceiling. I don't, any of that stuff. Doing those dives, these guys are tremendous. I don't knock them. Wrestling is really, really entertaining. And I don't knock them. I just couldn't do it. And some of the stuff that they do, I just got to shake my head and go, well, I'm glad that was your body and not mine. So, but, like I said, the stuff that Nick does and the stuff that APW does that I'm seeing, because I don't watch wrestling other than that, it's just amazing. So that's where I'm at. But I still feel I can do it sometimes. Sometimes I just wake up and, God, I'd give anything to have another match, but I just know it's not a realistic thing. And Dale says no.
Right. We know how that goes. Hey, I wanted to say one other thing was that the other connection between Ed, Mike, and myself is the very first time Mike Rodgers and I ever met was doing a Canby Brawl show that Ed Moondog Moretti put on in Canby, Oregon. Mike and I hadn't met, but we were the television announcers. It flowed terrifically, and it is on, there you go, it's on the Portland Wrestling YouTube channel, one of the matches, because it was Playboy Buddy Rose against Jimmy Superfly Snuka from Canby, Oregon. That match is on the Portland Wrestling 2000's YouTube channel. Be sure to check it out. It's a great match, a great story about Snuka not coming out at first. And we're going to be having more of those matches coming up very soon. Ed wrestled that night. The Riot Maker, Richie Magnet, wrestled. Mike Miller wrestled. Timothy Flowers wrestled. It was a great night of action. Yeah, and a lot of fun. But it was the very first time I ever met Mike Rodgers.
Yeah.
Mike Rodgers has called that his very favorite night in professional wrestling, getting to work with Frank Culbertson. I think that's what he has said.
Absolutely.
And for those who don't know, Mike, he was a PE teacher, and one of his students was a guy who just won the gold medal in the Olympics. And if you saw it, Mike tells me he subtly turned to the camera and said, "Thank you, Mike, for the tips on how to throw the shot put when I was only." I think that's what Mike Rodgers did.
It's a fun story that I've been thinking about lately. 20 years ago, here's this kid in my PE class, and you think to the future that he's going to be the greatest shot put ever. And I'm just kind of blown away by that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, I know that we have another guest coming up here in just a little bit, so I'll let you guys run because the grappler is just landing on a plane in Texas. Be joining me to talk about his thumb and how the commission worked in Texas and what he tried to warn Don Owen about that Don didn't listen. But these two guys, I'm not kidding, two of my very favorite people in the whole wide world who have helped me more than they will ever know in professional wrestling. Ed was always very kind to me, gave me good direction, helped in Portland wrestling like more than he will really realize. The stuff that he said and the things that I learned from him have stuck with me forever. And so I appreciate Ed so very much. And Dale, I appreciate your wife as well. And Mike, you and I have a wrestling book.
Thank you, Frank. I appreciate it too. Thanks for having me on. It was great talking to you and Mike. It's like old times again. I'm thinking, let's go up to the restaurant and plan some more. Sit there and have breakfast and plan some more. In Donald, Oregon, how we're gonna get this promotion off the ground.
The best, really best hamburgers ever.
That was a great restaurant, Donald Cafe.
I could still smell that restaurant. It was so good.
Well, thanks, guys. I'll let you go. And again, I've been like the channel, or Mike Rodgers will come after you. Hey, wrestling fans, no, you didn't miss the grappler. This is already gone for 1 hour. And so we're going to do a second episode with the grappler here on the Portland Wrestling 2000s channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single moment of when the grappler appears, which will be coming up here in just a day or two. And he is going to talk about his thumb and being fined for the tape on it. He's going to talk about the first time he met any of the commission in Portland and what he told Don Owen. And did Don Owen even listen to what the grappler had to say? Talk about the commission in Texas and how they treated things. And we're going to talk to him about what Jim Cornette said on The Experience, that it was the right move to go to the Dirty White Boys from the grapplers. Does the grappler agree with what Jim Cornette said? Be sure to tune in and subscribe so you find out what he has to say about that. That's next time on the Portland Wrestling 2000 channel. Again, Frank Culbertson saying thanks for tuning in.